Hello and welcome. This is Jennifer. I'm so glad you're here. I apologize that I haven't had a video in a while. I'm just having a hard time catching up on things, but I'll be back to regular videos soon. But today I have a fun video for you that you can do with any supplies you may have on hand. And this is a unique pop-up display card. This card flattens nicely to go into an envelope, and as soon as you take it out, it has this fun pop-up feature that really adds a ton of dimension and looks beautiful on display. I will share a few variations of this technique just so you can really see how it works with a lot of different products, and I'll do different sizes and orientations. So after watching this, I think you'll be able to create one of these on your own. Let's get started with this first example. For this, I'm using a new Build-A-Garden bundle from Altenew. I really like the style of this one and that it includes some really cool stencils and lots of sentiments in the stamp set. So the stamp set has the outline image. You could color it on your own, or you can use the coordinating stencils that allow you to add quick coloring. I also like that one of the stencils included creates a mask for that floral image and also has the polka dot portion of the stencil. I will be using those in today's video. Then, of course, you have the stencils that allow you to add quick coloring to the petals of the flowers. These stencils are numbered and have little etched lines, so it makes it really easy to line up each of the stencils. There's also a coordinating die, and that die set has the word friend and the shadow for the word friend, which lines up nicely with that stamp set that has lots of sentiments. I chose today to use the stamp wheel, but you could use any stamp positioner you may have. I put a piece of cardstock into the stamp wheel, and I used my anti-static powder tool. I'm stamping that big floral image with Altenew Obsidian black ink. This is a really bold, dark pigment ink. So you can stamp this and then add embossing powder to it and heat set it. Or you could just let it dry or heat set it without the powder and get a nice crisp black image. I use this ink a lot in videos. I will stamp this a second time. I'm kind of in the habit of doing that to make sure I get a nice solid crisp image. Now I can sprinkle on my clear embossing powder, but instead of heat setting it now, I'm going to set it aside and repeat that process. I'll use my anti-static powder tool. I'll stamp the ink or the image with black ink, add my clear embossing powder, and set it aside. And then I'll do that a third time. That way I can stamp and add powder to all of them at once and then heat set them all at once. The ink will stay wet long enough that you can leave your powder on there while you do the other stamping. So basically, I will end up with 3 floral images, all the same, all heat embossed. I'm not sure at this point if I'll use all 3 flowers on my card, but it's nice to have those extras. Okay, next I have my stencils. Now I wanted to show you how I mark my stencils and how I use them. I know that not everybody will like how I do this, but I thought I'd share it with you because it really works well for me. I number the stencil according to the number that's etched into the stencil, but I do it with black permanent pen. That way I can see it better and faster. So again, there is an etched number on these stencils, but I like to use a black permanent pen to write that number on there so it's easy to see, and then I put a piece of clear Scotch tape over that. I clean my stencils with rubbing alcohol, and if I didn't put the Scotch tape over that permanent marker, it would just wipe it away. So that little Scotch tape on there helps to protect that number. Now these stencils have 2 parts to it, and there is a long etched line between it. You can leave your stencils as one, but I just cut along that long etched line because really this is 2 stencils stuck together, right? So I'm cutting it into 2 individual stencils. It just makes more sense to me that way, but you definitely could keep them connected if you wanted to. Just wanted to share that tip with you. Next, I'll die cut each of my floral images. I prefer to die cut before I stencil because I find that my grip mat holds the die cut and stencil better in place. So that's how I prefer to do it, but you could definitely die cut after stenciling if you want. So inside of the stamp wheel is a grip mat, a sticky mat. It's the same material that stamps are made of. So it's nice because I can put my die cut on it, then place my stencil over it, and it'll hold there. It won't move as I do my inking. So I'm lining up the first stencil, and over it I'm applying a purple ink. Now, I am using a variety of blue and purple inks from Altenew. I'll be using both their older crisp dye ink, which is this oval ink pad here, and I'll be using their newer fresh dye ink, which is a round ink pad, which you'll see later. Both inks are wonderful inks, and you could use absolutely any inks that you want to here. I honestly just reached for the colors that I wanted. I decided to make this flower unique and have different shades of purple for the different petals. I did do a lighter purple over the whole petal, and then I'm coming in with a darker purple at the base of the petals, just for a little bit of variation in the look of shading, although I'm getting really creative with the colors here. This is definitely not a flower you would see in real life, but in my crafty imagination, it fits perfect. Okay, so after I did that first stencil, I can move on to the second one. Now this is the bottom half of the first stencil that I cut apart, and I'm lining this up. And you can see it just made more sense to me to cut that stencil that actually had two areas on it apart and treat it as two stencils instead of one. Now over this stencil, I'm applying some blue color. Again, I'm just going for a creative look here, but you could do a more realistic blending if you prefer. I'm using the mini blending brushes from Altenew. These are my most used inking tools because they're small and the bristles of it are very short, which allow you to have a lot of control over the ink as you apply it. I really like these tools. All right, so now it's time for the second stencil. This is the top half of the second stencil, and it lines up very easy. It does have that etching outline that helps you to line it up with the stamped image behind it or with the inking you've already done. Now over this one, I'm doing kind of a periwinkle. Really, I'm just kind of going for different blues and purple shades for the different petals. You'll notice that I'm using a lot of ink pad colors on this image. That's because I have them and I really like these colors. However, you definitely could get similar results using less ink pads. One thing you can do is take one ink pad color, apply it very light in some areas and very heavy in other areas, and it'll give you the look of having a light and a dark ink pad. Another thing you can do is overlap colors. So if you wanted like a purplish blue color, put down a little bit of blue ink and put a little purple ink on top, and that will create a new color. You can get really creative with just a few ink pads. All right, now I'm doing the stem, and then I'll finish off with the center of the flowers. By the way, if you've ever tried using stencil sets where there's multiple stencils that are used to color an image and you've struggled with it, I encourage you to try stencil sets like these that have that etching line that are very helpful in lining things up. It takes the guesswork out. So I repeated this process with the other two floral images. All right, now it's time to clean my stencils. I keep rubbing alcohol in a spray bottle, one quick spray of the alcohol onto the stencil, and then a dry cloth will clean them up really nicely. And because I put that piece of Scotch tape on those numbers, I don't have to worry about removing that with that rubbing alcohol. Now that my flowers are ready, it's time to create that pop-up card base. Now for this one, it'll end up flattening to be 4 by 5.5 inches. For this one, I have my scoreboard and a piece of cardstock that is 5.5 inches tall by 9 inches wide. I need to do 4 score lines. The first one will be 2 inches from one end, and then I'll rotate my paper and do 2 inches from the other end. So this will give us 2 score lines, both 2 inches from the ends of that cardstock. Next, I'm going to flip that cardstock piece over. You don't have to flip it if you don't want to, but it does help with giving good score lines. Now I will score 3¼ inch from each end. So I scored 3¼ inch, I'll rotate it and do the same from the other side. So now we have our 4 score lines. Next, I'll fold up along that outside score line that was at the 2 inch mark. And I'll do the same thing from the other end. Then I'll fold back at the other score lines. A tip for you is if you create a score line and the bump is facing up towards the camera, up towards you, you want to fold towards you. And that's just helpful in getting a nice crease, but really you could just score and fold however you want if you're using a high quality cardstock. Okay, so now this base ends up flattening to be 5.5 by 4. Next, I cut 3 pieces of white cardstock to go on the 3 different areas on the front of this card. 2 of the white cardstock pieces are 1 3/4 inches by 5 1/4. The other is 2.5 inches by 5 1/4. Now the smaller ones will go on the side flaps there, and then the wider one will go right there in the center. That will be what pops out as soon as you take it out of the envelope. So on these panels, you can do any kind of stamping or stenciling that you want. I thought I'd do a little bit of stenciling using that dot stencil from the bundle I showed you earlier. I'm not covering these panels with the dots. I'm just doing little areas of dots. So I put the stencil down, I apply a soft amount of purple ink over a little area using a blending brush, allowing those dots to kind of fade into the white. This is a fun and different way to use a stencil, and it gives a more subtle result. Next, I'm just temporarily putting the panels onto the front of the card. I'm not gluing them permanent just yet because I'm not sure if I want to add any stamping to them. So on that front panel, I decided to put one of the flowers kind of centered there on the bottom. And it was at that point I decided where I wanted to add my stamp sentiment. So I'll remove that center panel, put it into my stamp positioner, stamp the word friend from the same bundle stamp set, and then an additional greeting right above that, using black ink for both. Now keep in mind there is a friend die and shadow die included in the bundle, but I went for the stamping instead. Now I can add another floral image up towards the top, kind of peeking up from the edge, and then I put some on the back side panels too. Once I have them glued in place, I can trim off the excess, and you can see how some of those flowers stay set back and some pop up, but it flattens nicely. Now on the back side, I want a place to write my personal message. So I cut a smaller piece of white cardstock and I'm gluing it just on the left-hand side to the flap, and I'm using my extra flowers in the corners. I don't glue on both sides because I want this to pop up when it comes out of the envelope, so it'll still stand nicely and you can have your personal message on the back. So this is what it looks like when it comes out of the envelope. Immediately it pops up and you just have the center front of the card really coming out with a lot of dimension. It stands up wonderfully on display, and you have a place to write your personal message on the back. If you wanted to, you could skip adding that white piece there and instead just write on the back center of the pop-up card. It's totally up to you. But when it is on display, it actually goes wider, so the card appears to be bigger. But when you flatten it down, it does go to 5.5 by 4 inches. Okay, let's do a bigger version of this. This one flattens to be 5 by 7, and this time I'm adding die cutting to the front. This is the new Altenew Craft a Flower Calla Lily die set. I really like Altenew Craft a Flowers because most of them have this keyhole system. You can see one of the dies has an arrow, one has little keyholes, and one has little crosses, and it also has numbers. This allows you to know which die cuts go together and how they line up. You see those little keyhole openings? I'm just gluing each of those die cuts so that the keyhole opening lines up on each of them. This takes the guesswork out of figuring out how to layer die cuts, and it makes it so much easier. There still is a guide in the packaging that also is helpful, but really if you just follow the numbers and the little keyhole system, you can very easily and quickly layer together these fun flowers. And they have lots of different flowers. I just really like these calla lilies. I think the result is beautiful. I chose to cut mine from different shades of white, cream, and light yellow cardstock, but you definitely could do white cardstock for all of them and add inking to the different layers. I did decide to add just a little bit of yellow ink towards the tip of the flowers just to bring that yellow color out some more. After I die cut my leaves and my flowers, I used my sticky mat to assemble the pieces. So I have just put them on the sticky mat where I want them to be. Once I'm happy with the position, I'm just peeling up the different die cuts and squeezing a little bit of strong liquid adhesive anywhere the die cuts overlap. I then put something heavy on that while it dries, and once I'm done, I can peel that away from the sticky mat, and my die cuts are assembled just how I want them to be on the card. All right, now let's create that pop-up card base. This time it'll flatten to be 5 by 7 inches. So we need a bigger piece of cardstock to start with. This is 7 inches by 11 inches. And I will start by doing a score line at 2.5 inches from each end. So I did 2.5 from that end, I rotate it and do 2.5 from this end. Then I can flip that cardstock piece over for our next 2 score lines. These will be 4 inches from each end. So there we'll do 4 inches, rotate it, and do 4 inches again. All right, so the bump of the outer score line is facing up towards the camera, so I'm going to fold up onto that bump. And I'll do the same thing from the other side, and then I'll flip this over and fold the other direction. I gotta say, I like this pop-up display card in this larger 5 by 7 space because it really makes something that's big on display. If you've never tried a 5 by 7 card, I really encourage you to do so because the bigger space is really fun to play with. Before I add my flowers to the center, I thought I'd do a little stenciling on the corners using my Altenew Beautiful Baroque stencil set. Now there is an embossing folder that lines up with this, and you can do the stenciling on the texture from the embossing folder and it gives gorgeous results. This is definitely one of my favorite bundles from this year. However, I am going to just use the stencils alone. There are 3 stencils, so you could do a multicolor image. However, I'm doing them all with the same light yellow ink. I just wanted a little tone on tone on the corner. I didn't want anything too distracting. So I lined up the first stencil right in one corner, then I'll rotate and do in the opposite corner. I definitely could have saved time if I had chosen a single stencil to do in each of the corners, but I really like the design of this, and after doing all 3 stencils in all 4 corners, I think the results are definitely worth it. But again, I did the same color ink over each of the stencils. So I'm going to continue to do that off screen, lining up each of them. It's very easy to do, and just inking in the 4 corners. I really like the look of that subtle yellow ink on that cream cardstock. Next, I need my sentiment because it's going to help me put my flowers on the front. Now, the sentiment I'm using is Hello that I cut from gold cardstock, and then I added to a white shadow die cut. This is from the Altenew Timeless Sentiment die set, a favorite of mine. It has lots of different sentiments in their shadow dies. I'm gluing my flowers onto a white cardstock panel that is cut to fit nicely on the pop-up center of our card. You'll notice my stems aren't long enough to extend all the way down to the bottom of that panel, and I really want them to. So I'm going to hide them. I'm going to do a little trick thanks to using my sentiment in just the right spot. I'm cutting my stems shorter there, the 2 shorter stems. I'm going to put the Hello on top of it. And then I'll die cut some longer stems that I can glue to go below the word hello. So it looks like those stems reach all the way to the bottom, but I really am just piecing them together. And once I'm happy with the position, I'll let it dry and then I'll trim off the extra. And then we can glue this right onto the front portion of our pop-up card. And you can see how the yellow inking we did on the corners really ties in nicely with the yellow on our flowers. So let's take a look at this completed card. When it comes out of the envelope, it pops right up, really looks great on display. I did glue a white cardstock piece to the back left flap so that there's a place to write a personal message there. But again, you could write it directly on the back of the card if you prefer. I didn't add any accents to this because I really wanted the focus to be on the details of those floral die cuts. The best thing about this particular card design is that it really does flatten nicely to go into an envelope. So this will flatten nicely to go into a 5 by 7 envelope, but it really pops up and gives great dimension when on display. Okay, next I thought I'd show you how to create more of a landscape version of this card. Now for this one, I'm using die cutting on the front of our pop-up. This is the Altenew Through the Window die set. Great die set because you can create a little window scene for all 4 holidays. All the little dies are included. There's everything from a little snowman to leaves to flowers. Now, I thought I would do kind of a spring looking window because I'm ready for winter to be over already. Now for this card, I'm starting with a 5 by 10.5 inch piece of cardstock, and I'm scoring 2 3/4 inches from each end. I then will flip it over and score 4 inches from each end. After I do all of my folding, I'll end up with a pop-up card base that flattens to be 5 inches tall and 5.5 inches wide. Now that's a different card size for me. The reason I chose that size is it was what worked best with that window die set that I'm using. However, you could use the same measurements and make a landscape A2 card if you just start with a piece of cardstock that's not as tall. Let me show you what that looks like here. I started with a piece of 4 1/4 by 10.5 inch cardstock, but if you do the same steps, you end up with this A2 landscape card that you see on the left. So you can follow the same steps that I just did, just start with 4 1/4 by 10.5. But for my card, I'm going with that slightly taller 5-inch version. So here I have die cut a bunch of the die cuts from that window die set using various colors of cardstock scraps that I had. All of these dies are included in that set. I created my window from white cardstock. I'm adding lots of leaves and grass and a few different colors of flowers. I also have dark gray shutters that I can add to it. After I decorated the little window box there, we can add our shutters on the 2 sides. And again, remember that you can do different seasons for this, so you definitely could change this up all year round. Off screen, I stamped and die cut a bird from this Altenew Birds of the Season stamp set. It's meant to be for the holidays. However, I used spring colors on my bird and it worked just fine. I also used the From Our Home to Yours sentiment on this when we finish off our card. I really like this modern style of the stamp set and that fun wreath image that you can create. And I really wanted to find a way to extend the use of this set to non-holiday cards. Now that my window scene is done, I thought I'd add a little interest to the flaps on our card base. Now I did change my card base to be white instead of blue, but I did the same measurements you saw before. I'm using a tile debossing cover plate die from Altenew. This does not cut anything, it just does a piercing pattern. And I'm lining it up on the outside flap right up to the outside score line and running it through my die cut machine. And I'll do that on both sides. This will just add a piercing pattern on those 2 outside flaps, but that center area will stay nice and smooth so that we can add our window there. I'm putting glue on the back of our window element, just in the center area, not on the outside edges of the shutter. And I'll glue that right to that center pop-up area. I did carefully remove my bird. I'll add him back in a moment, but first I want to add some blue showing through the window opening, so the bird had to move out of the way for a moment. So I used the same window die to cut from light blue cardstock. This time I'm not using the frame of the window, but instead the panes themselves, and I'm just popping them in there. And this was from that light blue cardstock that I was going to use earlier, but I decided to change to white. We can move our bird back into position once again and add our sentiment below that. This is from the same stamp set. I stamped it with black ink on white cardstock and used the coordinating die to cut it out, and it fits there nicely right under the window box. So here is our completed card. I have it in a 5x7 envelope. You can see the front pops out and you have the window right there front and center and the shutters sticking out the side. I did put a piece of cardstock on the back where I can write my personal message. And other than that, I left it as is. We have that detail piercing on the outside panels that adds just a little bit of interest. And remember, you could change this up for different occasions throughout the year. So this one, when flattened, is 5.5 inches wide by 5 inches tall. And I think this is a good reminder that your cards don't have to be a standard size. As long as you have an envelope that the card can fit in, you can do whatever size card you want. And in this case, it's a little narrow, but it worked out great for the particular products I had. I was having a lot of fun with this, so I decided to do another example. Now this one, I'm using a foiling bundle. This has a foil plate, layering stencils that color in the foiled image, and there's a coordinating die available. And this gives really beautiful results. I loved the results of it, and I plan to do a set of note cards with different color flowers to give to one of Lila's teachers for Christmas. And it's such a classic looking image. It also has different parts that you could cut off and use in different ways. Now, I'm not going to show the whole stenciling process because it's very simple to line up the images with the foiled result. But I did want to mention that these stencils are also numbered in case you're curious. And you can see I'm doing my numbering system the same way I did before. So I have my Spellbinder's Glimmer machine, which will allow me to foil with this plate. I put the plate onto the warmed up machine, put my foil face down on it, and then a piece of white cardstock. I'll put my 2 plates on top of that and then press the timer button. When the timer stops flashing, I know it's time to take out all those platforms and run it through my Spellbinder's Die Cut machine. The Glimmer machine applies the heat, the die cut machine applies the pressure, and between that you'll get beautiful foiled results. Now I did this foiling pretty quickly. If you want to learn more about the foiling process, I will link to a video up here on the top right. All right, so then I use the coordinating die to cut that image out, and then the stencils to add the coloring. Really easy to do, and I did a mix of pinks and oranges so I could have a fun variation to it, kind of like I did with the purple flowers earlier. All right, now for the card base. This time I chose a piece of cardstock that is 5.5 by 9.5 inches. I'm scoring 2 inches from each end. Then I will flip it over and I will score 3.25 inches from each end. Now this is similar to the one that I did at the beginning of this video, but it'll actually be just a little bit wider in the end result. I'm hoping that by providing the dimensions for a few different size versions of this, that you can find one that you want to try and work with the products that you may have. Just be sure to jot down on a piece of paper or take a screenshot so you can remember the measurements. Once again, I'm using the Debossing die to do the piercing pattern on those outside flaps. I'm lining up the plate with the flap right up against that score line and running it through my die cut machine. I will then do the same thing on the other flap. You could do stamping here, stenciling, anything would work. For that center pop-up area, I have a piece of white cardstock that I matted with a bit of gold matte cardstock. At this point, I realized that the peach cardstock that I used wasn't a heavyweight cardstock, and it felt a little flimsy to me on the panels on the side. So I flipped my card over, and I'm just adding some white cardstock panels on the back, just so those side areas feel a bit stronger. You really don't have to do this, but I'm a big fan of making my card bases really strong. I feel like it makes for a better quality card and it'll just stand better on display. I could write my personal message on those flaps also. This is the back side of the card. But again, I did cut a piece of cardstock that would be a great place to write my personal message, and I'm gluing it onto the back left flap. All right, so back to the front of the card, we have our flower to add to it. I'm going to keep this card design very simple because I want the focus on that foiled image. For a sentiment, I'm using another favorite, Altenew Classic Greetings stamp set. This stamp set has great sentiments and there's a coordinating die set available. I chose to use Sending Hugs with black ink on white cardstock. All right, here we have our completed card. I have it in an A6 envelope, which is slightly bigger than an A2 envelope, so there's a bit of wiggle room there. And by the way, don't be afraid to use like an A6 envelope or a 5x7 envelope. The postage requirements are the same as an A2 envelope, so it really gives you more flexibility on how big of a card you can make. Here's a closer look at the results. You can see the foil, the piercing detail, and I did add a few little pink gemstones for added sparkle. Now, before we go, I wanted to share a little bonus card with you. I really liked the stencil set from that first bundle I used at the beginning of this video. And if you remember, there was a mask included. You can see it here. I actually cut that stencil apart also. You can see the mask over to the right. You could mask off a whole background, and then you have the dot over on the left. Well, I decided to cut my stencil even more and just cut the floral mask away from that frame. I know not everybody likes cutting their stencils, but I felt I would get more use out of it just as the flower mask on its own. Now I'm putting that mask onto a piece of white cardstock and I'm inking around it with kind of a halo of pool colored ink. I'm also using that little dot stencil and putting little random areas of dots here and there around that mask. So all I have on the white cardstock right now is that floral mask. Now I can remove that. I just used a little temporary adhesive to hold it there. And now in that opening, I can stamp my image. I put a piece of acetate over it so that my dirty stamp wouldn't ink up my background accidentally. And I'm lining up the stamp with that area that we masked. I'll stamp right on top of it, and then I can use the stencils to color that in. Now you could have used the stamp and the stencils first, then the mask, but honestly this just made more sense to me at the moment. I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with the design, so I did the masking first. And the results are beautiful. You have this bright floral image with this blue background. I really hope that Altenew includes more of these masks in their stencil sets because it allows you to create beautiful one-layer images. If you wanted a similar result and didn't have a mask, you would just stamp the floral image on masking paper or scrap cardstock and then fussy cut it to get a mask that way. By the way, the sentiment on this is from that same bundle that the stamp and stencils are from. All right, there you have it. Lots of card examples for you. I really hope you try these pop-up display cards because they're easy to do and you can use them with lots of products that you already have. If you're interested in what I used in my video, check out the links below in my YouTube description. And also at the end here, I'll link to a couple other related videos that you might be interested in. I thank you for spending this time with me. I'll be back soon with another video. Take care.